I think we will start. We'll start now. So, formally, I welcome you all to this today's webinar being organized on the sidelines of the 47th session of the Human Rights Council by World Muslim Congress and Kashmir Institute of International Relations. As is a sideline event of the UN's Human Rights Council, so I'll request all the panelists to use the UN language in their interventions. Today's discussion will resolve around the communications sent to the Government of India by the Special Rapporteurs and the non-compliance of Government of India to these communications. At least 6 communications were sent to Government of India till date after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution, thereby taking away the so-called autonomy, bifurcating the state and putting the whole Indian occupied state under complete lockdown and communication blockade, and amending the state subject laws and paving way for the demographic change in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. You know that United Nations High Commissioner issued 2 reports on Kashmir in 2018 and 2019 and handed over 17 recommendations to the Government of India to improve its human rights record in this occupied territory, and also was vindicated in those reports that the right of people of Jammu and Kashmir is intact and they should be given the right to decide their political future. However, Government of India not only rejected those reports but criticized the High Commissioner, and after that, instead of improving its human rights record, on 5th of August, it again sent 80,000 more troops to Kashmir, already having the density of 700,000 troops in the occupied territory, putting whole state under military siege. And you all know what happened thereafter and what's happening till now. During this period, when we talk of the reports, all those reports which Government of India denied and asked that these reports were malicious and fallacious, these were written at comfort zone, because Government of India did not allow the UN observers to visit the territory, and thereby these reports came as through a remote monitoring system. And if you will see those reports, you will find out that most of the information which is in those reports has been derived from the government sources, from FIRs, police reports, etc., and the research done by the local and international human rights organizations on the issue of Kashmir and the human rights situation of Kashmir. But Government of India did not give any heed to that, and after that, now 5th August onwards, as I discussed with you, the communications sent by the special rapporteurs jointly and individually to the Government of India, particularly on the change in domicile law and communication blockade and other human rights abuses which are happening there. Most recently, we saw a communication sent to the Government of India by the special procedures, 5 of the special procedures, and 3 cases especially were mentioned in that, including one of an extrajudicial killing of Irfan Ahmed Dar of Sopore. As soon as this communication appeared in the press, we saw the government forces arrested Javed Ahmed Dar, the brother of Irfan Dar. And in the interrogation, he's asked to reveal how come this case came into the light of the UN special procedures, who facilitated this, and who are the people who have been who are in contact with the UN. So this is a clear case of reprisals. Our government of India is using reprisals against human rights defenders, against the journalists and others. There's lots of stories on that. But I wanted to mention this particular case because it's a total new one, which has come to our knowledge and to the knowledge of the UN special procedures also. So if this is the case, if there's a human rights machinery, if there's a system of huge human rights machinery put in place by the United Nations to protect and safeguard the human rights on ground, if such is the response from the government, how can we move forward? What is the way out to find out the solutions to the sufferings of the people in conflicts, especially that of in Jammu and Kashmir? We have a very galaxy of speakers. We will be shortly joined by Farhan Mujahid Chak, who is an associate professor at political science at the Gulf States graduate program, Qatar University. As he has recently gone to Canada and he is there in quarantine this time and he finds some difficulty in signing in. He will be with us. We have been joined by Advocate G.N. Shaheen, a very good friend of mine and a very vocal voice in Kashmir for the rights of people of Kashmir. He has been the Secretary General of Kashmir Bar Association. You all know Kashmir Bar Association has always played a very frontal role in creating awareness about the human rights abuses in Indo-occupied Kashmir. G.N. Shaheen also has the Kashmir Council for Justice, and currently he is the chief spokesperson of Jammu Kashmir High Court Bar Association. I welcome you, Mr. G.N. Shaheen. I have with me Mr. Mehmet Sukru Guzel, again a good friend of mine, a very old hand in the UN human rights systems. He has his own viewpoint about the human rights and the conflicts around the globe. He is writing extensively on these, and especially on the conflicts like Kashmir. He has written on the Sri Lankan conflict, on the Myanmar, and also Ole Island and other conflicts. He's very much in the UN systems. And we have with us His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Hussain Bosad. He is the Special Representative of International Human Rights Commission and its envoy to the UNOG. We have with us Gulela Ferrare, if I pronounce it correctly, from Italy, human rights expert and international law student. I welcome you. Barrister Nadia Salam, a son of soil. She's a barrister. She's practicing law in Islamabad currently, but a very energetic and young voice for the people of Kashmir. Last but not least, I have with me also Mozam Ali Sindhu. Mozam Ali Sindhu is a solicitor, Commissioner for Human Rights, Citizens Commission for Human Rights, and ex-chairman International Lawyers Club UK, and chairman Society for British Pakistani Lawyers UK. I welcome you, Mozam, to the show. And Mariana Zacca, my friend from Italy and human rights expert. I welcome you all. Chak Saab has finally joined us. Welcome to the program, Chak Saab. I will straight away go to the Srinagar, where we will hear from Advocate G.N. Shaheen. As we are seeing currently, meeting is being held in New Delhi between some of the Kashmiri leaders who used to be the collaborators in the occupation, who were put behind the bars on August 5th. But this time they are meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Delhi. What will be the outcome of that meeting, we will see later on. But straight away, I will go to the G.N. Shaheen for his remarks. G.N. Shaheen, you have the floor.
I am highly thankful to you for giving me space in this program. First, I would like to know whether I am audible to you or not.
Yeah, you are clearly audible.
Okay. I think which you have put it a very elaborative statement on the program, but you have touched the developments in Delhi also today taking place. I personally feel it is a welcome measure that the government of India is opening the doors for a discussion, which doors were closed past so many years. And with I hope that it will lead to ice breaking on the subject of human rights and political developments in the region. So far as the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, it is very grave, past 30 years particularly, but since after abrogation of Article 370 and 35A on 5th August 2019, the entire Kashmir is an open prison. And I would like to make it clear that you are mentioning the human rights rapporteurs reports. Honestly saying that we had no knowledge of these human rights reporters because our communication links were snapped after 5th August 2019. And past 6 months, we have been now these links are re-established. Therefore, we are pleased to know it from the persons at work at international level about the human rights reports. No doubt in 2019, we had also done an exercise. 2018, some people approached us and we substantiated our arguments with the records from judicial records, which were available us as per the records of the Honorable High Court of Jammu and Kashmir, as well as the subordinate courts which are dealing with these rights issues. So far, my concern is that at this time, that common Kashmiri has no political space. Our political rights are totally suppressed, number one. Number two, no human rights activist is at liberty to say what he wants to say exactly and reflect the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir. Because human rights defenders have been under constant attack. And I will tell you that Mr. Parvez Imroz, who is a leading human rights activist in Kashmir, his office was raided once. His all materials, they were scrutinized by the security agencies. And human rights defenders, they are on a security concern on both sides. I can't blame one side. Both sides, we are on the very precarious situation. So I feel that the government of India should bind itself by the international commitments, particularly on the human rights issues. When we talk about the human rights issues, these human rights issues are ingrained, in fact, in the part third of the Constitution of India, which guarantees life, liberty, freedom of expression, freedom of media, freedom of other freedoms. So government of India should respect its own constitution. What I personally feel that it is not observing in Jammu and Kashmir in honor, but they are observing it in breach. Because if you will go by chronological events in Jammu and Kashmir, first 6 months after 5th August 2019, entire Kashmir was under lockdown. There were no communication links. Our phone links were snapped. We had no links with the outside the state. What would it was a hearsay for everybody know about the things. Even our electronic media. And the court proceedings, even the court proceedings are not being allowed to publish in the curriculum in the local vernacular media or in this electronic media. So so these things are to be addressed by the international community. We are pleased to know that the United Nations Human Rights Council has already taken up matter with the government of India. I hope that government of India should respond positively, because India is a democratic country. Their claim is that we are a democracy. We are the largest democracy. Therefore, the democratic rights are to be honored by the government of India. They have abrogated Article 370 unilaterally, without any debate, without any discussion, without taking people, cross sections of the people in Jammu and Kashmir in confidence. Not only they did it, but they have broken the state into 2 union territories, including Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir. Now the people are apprehending the 3rd division because of the new developments which are emerging, because there is additional concentration of troops being made in Jammu and Kashmir, controlled by India. So all these issues are of grave concern. We have gray areas. For example, we have prisoners in jails. The most astonishing fact is that the prisoners who are arrested from Jammu and Kashmir, they are being lodged outside the city, thousands of miles away from their home, which renders them non-accessible to legal counsel. Number one. Number two, their home people are not accessible to them, because it will take it cost more than 50,000-60,000 rupees for a simple 5-minute meeting with the kith and kin who is in the prison outside the state. So we have I also requested government of India a number of times through media, through representations, that this practice be abolished, and the detentions outside the state of Jammu and Kashmir not only lead to the prevention of legal counsel, contacts with the home people, but also these things lead to protracting the trials. So I can sum up these things that we are being punished with our trials. So we have thousands more, according to government sources, more than 4,500 persons are in detention who are facing a trial in different courts, but the courts are not, they have no access to the courts, and their trials are protracting, which leads to punishment without trials. Another aspect of the dimension of the problem is that we are under now the natural calamity because of the COVID virus. The Kashmir is not exception to it. I can let me make it clear that since 5th August 2019 till today, we have only 50 to 60 physical mode of appearances available before the court. 50 to 60 days only. Rest we are on the virtual mode. But this virtual mode also creates problems, because we have no such a facility so that we can communicate the courts, our real aspirations, our real arguments, which are to be considered by the courts. So I think all these things lead to denial of justice. So I think the courts are non-accessible at this time for a common prisoner. So these things are to be appreciated by the world community, including the government of India, that no human rights are inborn in the Constitution of India. These human rights are to be extended to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. No doubt they have abrogated Article 370, but the abrogation of Article 370 does not mean that they have to deprive the people of Kashmir from the basic human rights. Even prisoners are entitled under Supreme Court judgments. Supreme Court of India in a number catena of judgments have laid down that the basic human rights are also available to the inmates in jails. They are only deprived of one right, that is right to liberty. Rest of the rights are available to them. But fact of the situation is quite different. So we think the United Nations Human Rights Council, they have to increase their efforts in order to have reports from concerned jail authorities about the plight of the detainees, from the courts, how the courts are functioning in Jammu and Kashmir. So we cannot, the courts have to display justice. They have not to protect the government actions. the normal course at this time in Jammu and Kashmir, we observe as lawyers, is that the government is, the courts are, they feel that we are here to only protect the executive actions, when they have to scrutinize the executive actions in right perspective, whether executive action is right or wrong. But now see, with regarding to the Article 370 is pending before the Supreme Court of India, but the Supreme Court of India is not giving hearing, is not hearing this matter. They are not fixing these petitions. There's a bundle of petitions on Article 370 abrogation before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, and we hope that international community will give a call to the government and the Supreme Court of India, Chief Justice of India, that let this 370 petitions regarding to the valid abrogation of Article 370. Let the courts determine, scrutinize the whole parliamentary and executive action, but that is not happening. So this concern needs to be raised by the international this United Nations Human Rights Council. So these things, in case now
Shahin sir, we will listen to you. We'll listen more to you after in a question answer session if we get the time. If you can conclude it, your discussion.
I'm concluding with this hope that the fundamental rights or the universal human rights guaranteed under the United Nations Human Rights Declaration, 10th December 1948, Government of India is called upon to honor the basic charter of the human rights and the Charter of Human Rights as guaranteed under Part 3rd of the Constitution of India, and take and behave as a democratic country, as a responsible.
I think Government of India doesn't want to listen to the Shahin Saab's requests. Again, the communication is shut.
They have, it is their constitutional as well as international obligation to observe the human rights with reference to the Kashmir in honor, not in breach. And in case this is done, there is a hope that we can lead to a certain other atmosphere. But before last but not the least, I welcome the opening of doors for discussion by Government of India with the people of Jammu and Kashmir. No doubt at this stage, they are calling the power stream. I can't say it is not mainstream. It is a wrong expression used by the government by the media. In fact, there are two expressions. Mainstream is something different. It is the power the stream. They have called for a discussion. I hope they will, the essence of the democracy is acceptance of the right of dissent. Those who of India, in their opinions, it is the obligation of the Government of India to call all those forces for discussion, so that ways for peace are opened, and not only with the, but another dimension is that since it is a conflict zone, Kashmir is broken into now 3 parts. One part is under the control of Pakistan, another part is controlled by India, another part is controlled by China. Therefore, the new corridors are to be open for all the stakeholders to open, to initiate a comprehensive, substantive, purposeful dialogue, so that in case we want purposeful peace in the region, it cannot be done in isolation. If we will, unless we are not addressing the political angle of the situation, diplomatic angles of the situation. So if these political and diplomatic angles are being addressed, I think it will definitely improve the situation of human rights in Jammu and Kashmir.
Thank you, Shahin sir, for your input to the discussion. As you rightly pointed out, the way Government of India is talking to its own people, though they abandoned them on 5th of August, but again, they have now invited them for a discussion. But the conflict remains there. As soon as Government of India will not talk to the other stakeholders, that is the real people who represent the sentiments of people of Kashmir, as well as Pakistan, and the other stakeholders, the issue will remain there. It cannot be resolved. About the human rights reports, you said I will send you all those communications which have been released by the you sent to the government of India by the UN special procedures, and the government of India has not responded yet to any of these communications. Even on the inaugural speech which Human Rights Commissioner did on the 47th session yesterday, she mentioned that I did report on the human rights situation of Jammu and Kashmir in the 46th session, but in this session there is no room for that because lots of other conflicts are discussed. At least she discussed 22 situations in the 46th session, which include the Jammu and Kashmir, and this time she has many more situations to discuss in her updates. But there was discussion on Kashmir also, and more importantly about the right to freedom of assembly and press you mentioned. And yesterday another of the communications that was sent to government of India, which came in the press, that was the type of moral ethics and code of conduct they have made for the social media and media in India, which curtails the right to freedom of assembly, press, and also right to privacy. Now I'll go straight to Chak Saab. He's in quarantine, so after that I will give the ambassador Osam, as he has to also leave for a meeting. So Chak Saab is, as I already introduced him, he was not on the screen at that time. He's a professor of political science at the Gulf Studies graduate program, Qatar University. He has written extensively on politics, political theory, secularism, peace, and conflict studies, and he's contributing to the Al Jazeera, Daily Sabah, and TRT World, Turkish radio and television. Currently, he's also working on a book, The Myth of Partition and Kashmir's Contested Identity. Above all, that Mr. Chak has also been involved in the United Nations. He has worked with the United Nations. He has worked with the Canadian government. And most recently, he has sent many of the communications on his part to the United Nations special procedures, especially to the working group on enforced disappearances, on the cases of enforced disappearances in Jammu and Kashmir. So we will listen from Professor Farhan Mujahid Chak. Mr. Chak, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Altaf Hussain Saab. Wani Saab, it's always a pleasure and it's an honor to be wherever you are, and you've made tremendous sacrifices. I just wanted to make sure that everybody can actually hear me right now.
Yeah.
Because your voice is actually quite low. Am I clear?
Yeah, you are clear. You are loud and clear to me.
All right. Well, to start, I'd like to kind of comment on some of the points that were raised previously. And I think that even though they're well-intended, they kind of harm the characterization of the Kashmiri freedom movement when we consider what's happening right now. And it's very timely, just to add, what you're doing today is so timely, because this meeting in Delhi is not something that we should welcome. We should be extremely wary of what's happening. You know, there's been a lot of talk in the news and in Kashmiri media about the so-called Gupkar alliance. You know, I like to call what's happening the Chutney alliance. This is a way in which India will try to make its distasteful presence in Kashmir palatable. So the easiest way to make something very bland palatable is to dip it in chutney. And this is what Indians have been trying to do with Kashmir ever since 1846, actually, and since the Dogra rule, if we can characterize that as a Hindutva, Hindu radical state, same like we have today in India. But nonetheless, so I am not hopeful at all. The only motivation to have this meeting and gathering of what is legitimately called thieves, and excuse me, Mr. Shaheen rightly pointed out that these are not mainstream. These are known as collaborators and turncoats that have sought personal privilege and benefit to negotiate with the state and then negotiate with this foreign occupying state to oppress, repress, and then pacify the resistance. And this has been going on ever since 1947. This is actually, this whole process was started by Sheikh Abdullah as a means to kind of ingratiate themselves to a higher power, seek benefit, and then in response, crush the aspiration and the will of the people. So I like to be crystal clear on what India is when it comes to Kashmir. India is an apartheid state, and we shouldn't mask that. We should call it out as it is. It's an apartheid state. It is filling all major government positions and educational, business with non-Kashmiris. This is clearly colonialism. So what we have also in Kashmir is settler colonialism, and we need to describe and talk about the issue of Kashmir as an occupation that is being kept under wraps through 800,000 army, but including paramilitaries and other forces, close to 1 million Indian soldiers. So it's just a characterization that needs to be very clear when we talk about what's happening and what India has tried to kind of pull the wool over the world's eyes. And now, especially with this kind of weak and clumsy and very fanatical government in India, so they've tripped over their own feet so many times, and this facade, the soft image that India had built, has collapsed. And what we see now, what the world is seeing now, is complete callousness when it comes to a medical response to COVID. We're seeing intentional, just until recently, they had full intention of holding the Amarnath Yatra. Now imagine, there is absolutely credible information and evidence to suggest that the Kumbh Mela that happened months ago was responsible for the super spreader and the crisis that ravaged India. Now, what kind of people would want to encourage such an event, this Amarnath Yatra, which in itself is an invented kind of pilgrimage that traces its roots to the Dogras, but to bring in about 600,000 Hindu devotees to the disputed territory. So you can see there's this deep callousness, and there is this a very cruel way that the Indian state has always dealt with Kashmir. And anything, even these meetings that are happening, and they're going to continue to happen, will really amount to nothing. They will not go anywhere in rectifying the genuine crisis, which is the crisis of occupation, the crisis of this heavy militarization, this crisis of an apartheid Indian state that is crippling and crushing and actually trying to deny Kashmiri identity and erase it. And I think one of the best examples of that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, is I think now it's 3.4 million fake domicile certificates. What kind of people invent certificates of ethnicity in order to rationalize their presence in a place? And so this goes to a deep psychology, and I think this needs to be exposed more. Building Hindu temples where there are no Hindus, just to kind of create this myth throughout the world, particularly in the valley. The valley is 99% Kashmiri Muslim. So you just see these tactics that India has constantly been trying to do to confuse the world, to obfuscate the reality, to bring in what I call like this chutney alliance, to try to make their distasteful rule palatable to not only, mostly to the world, but even to some of their own detractors inside. That's increasing. But it's not going to amount to anything, because it's avoiding the main issue, that Kashmir is not India, that Kashmiris are not Indian, and they don't want to remain. So there's not a separatist anti-national movement. You cannot be a separatist of something you don't belong to. So this is where I think what we have and what we should do is raise awareness on this is all trickery, and we need to expose it. And another very interesting and very important thing that you yourself mentioned, Mr. Awani, and thank you for that. Yes, I'm engaged with various UN working groups. And one in particular is the summary execution of Shaheed Marhum Ashraf Sarai. If the world were to know the story, and now his two sons, one was already murdered, and two now have been picked up, and there is not clear evidence on where they are. But nonetheless, the issue is this, that this is what the Indian state does with one hand. It murders if you refuse to accept their terms. And then it'll reach out to others, and this is all for showboating. It tries to negotiate what it can give away, play, and then it'll have them arrested again once it feels the pressure has lessened. And what we need to continue to do, and what seminars and the work that your great institution is doing, Altaf Wani Saab, is to continue to keep the pressure on in all international fora, in multilateral organizations, whoever we speak to, as your legitimate voice, and you can tell people that these are the crimes that are happening. And as all people, we can come together and say that everybody has the right of self-determination. Nobody can coerce identity or coerce a situation as the one that exists in Kashmir. And inshallah, that's what we hope to do, is to continue to raise this issue. But really, at the end of it, we hold no hopes for these kind of theatrical and misdirect attempts at misdirecting the people. Those were my brief comments, and I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity, Altaf Wani Saab, and the floor is back to you.
Thank you, Chak sir, for your intervention. You rightly pointed out to the Indians settler colonialism in Kashmir and the way they are dealing with the people of Kashmir, and the Hinduta mindset, the way they are building the constructing the temples in Kashmir where Hindus are non-existent. And there's another aspect of it, that is the militarized pilgrimage. They are finding new and new places in Kashmir to organize the Hindu pilgrimage to Kashmir. And we have seen the upsurge of COVID-19 in India, the way they organized the Kumbh Mela in Haridwar, and then we saw them, how India faced the worst kind of COVID in there. But instead of learning lessons from that, what Indian government did, it organized a tourist festival in Kashmir at Tulip Gardens, and now they are intended to organize the Amarnath Yatra and Kashmir without any screening and all that, and it will be again very lethal for the people of Kashmir because it will have a devastating impact on their health and social fabric. So with this, I will give floor to His Excellency Ambassador Hussain Bo Al Saad. He has to attend a UN meeting, a ministerial meeting at 4 Beirut time, and 6, that's our 6th. So Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Alta, for being again with you and with all my dear colleagues. Without no offensive, I'm very sorry to leave at 4 because of what you have mentioned, as we are engaged in this ministerial forum. And what I'm gonna say today in this session, it was registered at the 46th session of the Human Rights Council under the agenda item 4 at the General Assembly. To point out on the Kashmiri issues that had suffered so much that it's hard to point a day as its darkest. Yet, February 23, 1991 can perhaps be called the darkest day in the history of Kashmir. On this cold and dark night in 1991, Indian Army barked into the twin villages of Kunan and Poshpora in Kupwara district. The area was already under Indian control since 1947, but had been facing political unrest since the insurgency of 1988-1989. Indian soldiers celebrated their victory over the defiant Kashmiris by raping every girl and woman in those two villages. Rigging elections of 1987 and the insurgency. The history of mankind is full of conflict, and every conflict has painful stories of brutality and inhuman actions. India, that under Gandhi and Nehru presented itself as a tolerant civilization, has unfortunately added new chilling dimensions of barbarism to a troubled human saga. Though Kashmiris have suffered untold miseries at the hand of erstwhile Maharaja and then Indian occupation after 1947, after 1989, this turned into an unbelievable and unending nightmare. Kashmir has always demanded accession with Pakistan, but rigged elections of 1987 amidst a new younger generation that rejected their elder pacifism sparked statewide resistance and an armed struggle for freedom from Indian occupation. Indian army in the world's most militarized region reacted with an iron hand and under the name of search operation, tortured, arrested, maimed, and killed countless civilians, enforced disappearances, fake encounters, extrajudicial killings, imprisonment without any legal process, and property destruction became a part of everyday life in the valley. Rape, India's favorite weapons of war. When this was not enough, Indian security forces used rape as a weapon of war to demoralize civilians, destroy their self-respect, and crush their urge for freedom. Many times, rape was used as retaliation for militant attacks on security forces. According to an investigation reported of Asia during the International Human Rights field work, and physicians of human rights published on the rape issue that has also occurred frequently during the reprisal attacks on civilians following militant ambushes. In these cases, any civilian residing in the area becomes the target of retaliation. Anyone within the range may be shot, homes and others' property burnt, and women raped. In some cases, women have been raped has been accused of providing food or shelter to militants, or have been ordered to identify their male relatives as militant. In other cases, the motivation for the abuse is not explicit. In many attacks, the selection of victims is seemingly arbitrary. And the women, like other civilians assaulted or killed, are targeted simply because they happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Since most cases of rape take place during cordon and search operations, just living in a certain area can put women at risk of rape. The reports continues to mention, although Indian human rights groups and the international press have reported on the widespread use of rape by the Indian security forces in Kashmir, the use of rape in the conflict has seldom attacked much international condemnation. Finally, we reiterate ourselves with the OHCHR demands on urging the governments of India and Pakistan to respect and protect human rights, particularly the appeal to India to ease restrictions and curfew, ensure people have access to basic services, and respect all due process guarantees for all detainees. It is very important for the people of Kashmir to participate in consultation and in any decision-making process that affects their future. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. You brought in a very important subject in discussion, that is rape. Yes, rape has been used as a weapon of war in Kashmir, and this has been mentioned in the two reports of the Human Rights Commissioner and numerous reports of the international organizations who have done research on Kashmir. And unfortunately, what we see, there's those who are the perpetrators are being given promotions, rewards, and gallantry awards by the government of India by virtue of the impunity that is already prevailing on the ground. So thank you very much for your contribution. Now I will go to Gulale Ferrare because she has joined me earlier. So Gulale, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I wanted to thank WMC and Kashmir Institute of International Relations for welcoming me as a panelist today. I'm really honored to speak about occupied Kashmir because it's a very important topic, and it constantly reminds ourselves that even if we live in a modern society, there's still a long way to achieve in many different regions of the world, implement fundamental human rights. Kashmir, as previously said, is one of the most militarized areas of the world. And in fact, as underlined by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights in its report on the situation of human rights in Kashmir, there is a collection of serious and massive violations of human rights with the action of armed groups, killing of civilians, political activists, protesters, and the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir did not establish any investigation in those civilians' killings. So the different roles pursued by men and women, by women in armed conflicts often lead to violations of human rights. As said previously by the ambassador, women are constantly exposed to rape as a war weapon. And also, along with children, women are one of the most vulnerable categories of the society, and especially when speaking of warfare. They are victims not only of physical, but also of psychological violence, and the situation worsens when it comes to conservative societies. This is something that we can observe in Kashmir. Some of the human rights violations that take place in India-administered Kashmir are the lack of access to justice and impunity, administrative detention, excessive use of forces, many civilian killings, use of pellet-firing shotguns, arbitrary arrests and detention, including of children, torture, enforced disappearance, violations of the rights to health, and restriction to rights on the freedom of expression, media blockage, and reprisals towards journalists, violations on the rights of education, and also sexual violence and rape. Since Kashmir is a de facto region, it doesn't benefit from the qualification of the jure formal sovereign state. And being administered by India and Pakistan, it has been in different occasions a scenario of human rights serious and massive violations. Its people are constantly the main characters of inhumane and degrading treatments. On the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights report, we find many recommendations, for example, to the Human Rights Council to possibly establish a commission of inquiry to conduct a comprehensive independent international investigation into the allegations of human rights violations in Kashmir. And there are many different recommendations to India. Some of them are to fully respect and implement India's international human rights law obligations in India-administered Kashmir, to give the government central government permission to prosecute security forces personnel accused of human rights violations into civilian courts, to investigate all of the deaths that have occurred in the context of security operations, and investigate all of the cases of abuses and sexual violence, to give many different kind of reparations and rehabilitations to the individuals or to the families of those who have been killed, and to bring into compliance with the international human rights standards and laws, all of the Indian laws. So we also see that one extremely important recommendation speaks about the children, so the right of children, and to treat any person below the age of 18 who has been arrested in a manner consistent with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and to end the restrictions on the movement of journalists, to give more freedom of speech, to ratify the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. And another thing is that India has not been compliant with regards on the Universal Periodic Review, which is a Human Rights Council mechanism, and it has been analyzed in 2008, 2012, and also in 2017. And many different countries have been making recommendations to India to implement their respect to the human rights, especially in the administered Kashmir. And the Indian government claims of respect for the UPR process, but on the facts is something that does not emerge. So what India is performing in India administered Kashmir is a set of serious and massive violations of human rights that can be associated with war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression that constitute crimes over which the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction. We can take as some example for genocide, which is part of Article 6 of the ICC, the Rome Statute, and it's a violent act carried out with special intention. It is carried out with the intent to destroy, so ethnic cleansing, and to destroy protected groups, which can be national groups, ethnic ones, religious, or racial, or on racial basis. Another article is the crimes against humanity, the one regarding crimes against humanity, which is Article 7. And crimes against humanity are extensive or systematic attacks on the civilian population that happen with the awareness of the attack, and also war crimes, which is on Article 8 of the ICC, which are violations, violent violations of human rights and violations of the Geneva Convention. One of the important progresses that we can observe on the International Criminal Court is that now non-international conflicts are to some extent put on the same level of international ones. We are deeply concerned, I believe I can say it for everyone who's present here, about the situation and the long-term effects that these atrocities will have on the Kashmiri people. And therefore, I believe it's important to ask the international community to encourage, address, and help Kashmiri people based on paragraph 139 that states that the international community and the United Nations also have the responsibility to use appropriate diplomatic, humanitarian, and peaceful means in accordance with Chapter 6 and 8 of the Charter of the United Nations to help protect the populations. And another solution could be pursuing international criminal measures, such as international criminal ad hoc tribunals, hybrid criminal courts between United Nations and states, and the International Criminal Court itself. And I am aware that these fundamental recommendations cannot be realized and fulfilled without this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mulali, for your very insightful input on how the UN and UN agencies can use their mechanisms to facilitate, to end the sufferings of the people of Kashmir. You brought in the recommendations of the Office of the High Commissioner's report into discussion, but unfortunately none of these recommendations was adopted. You talked about the Universal Periodic Review. I was part of the 3 of the Universal Periodic Reviews against of India, and we saw that there were nearly 178 recommendations the government of India to prove its human rights record, and 33% of those recommendations was towards Kashmir. And among them, it was mostly importantly to repeal the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the Public Safety Act, and other draconian laws which have been enacted, and Government of India was asked to sign and ratify the Convention Against Torture and Inhuman and Degrading Treatment, and also the Convention on Enforced Disappearances, and also the Convention on the Violence Against Women. But unfortunately, none of this has been done by the Government of India so far, although while making its pledge as a member of the Human Rights Council, Government of India has pledged all this, that they will do this. But we have seen from 1992, the Convention on Torture remains in the Indian Parliament. The same thing is happening, but on the contrary, when we see the Indian Parliament comes into action in one day, passes an Parliament Act and snatches the Article 370 and 35A of Indian Constitution. This has been the behavior of the Indian state so far, and unfortunately, the UN recommendations and the communications have not resulted in any positive change in the Indian attitude. The attitude remains the same. So I will bring in now the discussion in the legal luminary, Mozam Ali Sindhu, Solicitor and Commissioner for Human Rights. Mozam, sir, you have this floor.
Thank you very much, Altaf and Vanessa. First of all, I congratulate to you. This is my first time I become the part of this webinar, and I'm very glad and proud that I'm speaking for those people whose voice is much required to be heard worldwide. Their oppression, the way the Indian armed forces and Indian government crushing their human rights, these matters must have been heard on the international forums by the world leaders, by the international organizations. But unfortunately, it is very sad to say that, and it is very unfortunate. In 21st century, we have the world leaders who are not considering the basic rights of those humans, and they believe that those humans are not part of the world, as the Indian occupied Kashmir has become the prison now. The people of Indian occupied Kashmir, their basic rights, all the fundamental rights, which the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has given them, which the United Nations has given them, and we all know that the India is part of United Nations and they must oblige the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But unfortunately, the world leaders are not criticizing, not only ignoring the fact how the Kashmiris are facing all of these tragedies, all of these atrocities, all of these miseries, but also all the people who are living worldwide in different independent states, we believe that that is all insane, inhuman, and unfortunate situations. I would like to, before I just refer few things, I've been given two reports with the link. One was published in 8th of July 2019, and the other was published on 14th of June 2019 by the United Nations Human Rights High Commission Office. I just want to comment on those reports. Before that, I want to highlight a few important articles for your permission, if you allow me, which were the part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because we all must need to give the regard and respect to those rights, being the member of the United Nations, being the member of the world forums. Those rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which were published and part of the world law, international law, the United States Supreme Court has given the regards to this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the international law, and it becomes now the customary law as well. This is the duty of every single state to must uphold these laws. So I just want to refer a few articles After that, I will move forwards to those reports. The Article 1 Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that we all are born free and equal. We all have our own thoughts and ideas. We shall all be treated in the same way. Article 3, we all have the right to life and to live in the freedom and safety. Article 5, nobody has any right to hurt or torture us or treat us cruelly. Article 7, the law is the same for everyone. It must treat us all fairly. Article 8, we can all ask for the law to help us when we are not treated fairly. And Article 9, nobody has the right to put us in prison without a good reason, to keep us there or to send us away from the country. Article 13, we all have the right to go where we want to in our country and to travel abroad as we wish. Article 22, we all have the right to a home, enough money to live, and the medical help if we are ill. Music, art, craft, and sport are for everyone to enjoy. Article 25, we all have the right to enough food, clothing, housing, healthcare. Mothers and children and people who are old, unemployed, and disabled have the right to be cared for. Article 28, there must be proper order so we can all enjoy rights and freedoms in our own country and all over the world. Article 29, we all have a duty to other people and we should protect their rights and freedoms. And the last article of Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, nobody can take away these rights and freedoms from us. So these are the basic laws which are now the part of the several Supreme Courts of the world states that every single state must have to give the regards to these rights. So now I want to comment on small things that there are many solutions shared and given by different peoples that Indians, the Kashmiris, the Pakistan claims the part of Kashmir, the India claims some part of the Kashmir. Someone says that we want the solution of the two-state theory or the one-state theory or whatever. I don't have view. It should be left on Kashmiris. This is the right to the Kashmiris who can decide on. But I do have a view on Kashmiris being shot, being blinded, cruelly assaulted. I do have belief and I do have view on that. They have illegally detained, cut off from world. It's the outrage. The Indian government and Pakistan government both claims that they have Kashmiris, but unfortunately, the situation in Kashmir is at the moment worldwide is alarming and need attention because the Indian has around 700,000 soldiers and one soldier over 25 people because there is the population of population of Kashmiris are 12.5 million according to 2011 census. So according to the reports which was shared, a 43-page report by the by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, released on July 8, 2019, these reports raises serious concerns about the abuses by state security forces and armed groups in both Indian and Pakistan held parts of Kashmir. The Indian government dismissed the report as a false and motivated narrative that ignored the core issues of cross-border terrorism, whatever. However, the Pakistan welcomed the report, but requested that the sanctions be removed and amended in which the information was not specific to Pakistan administrative Kashmir, but were generally human rights concerns affecting all Pakistan, because Pakistan is an underdeveloping country. We do have less sources of education, less sources from the government's funded organizations and institutions. So, but the Indian occupied Kashmirs, their breaches of human rights are more serious. It's a blame that the human rights violation in Kashmir while ignoring their own responsibility for abuses. I would like to refer few things in the reports, which of the Office of the Human Rights Commissions noted that the Indian Armed Forces Jammu and Kashmir Special Power Act remains a key obstacle to accountability because it provides effective immunity for serious human rights violations since the law came into force in Kashmir in 1990. The Indian government has not granted permissions to prosecute any security force personnel in civilian courts. United Nations Human Rights Office also said that India should amend its Public Safety Act, an administrative detention law that allows detention without charge or trial for up to 2 years. The law has often been used to detain protesters. It's not often been used, it's always been used to detain protesters, political descendants, and other activists on vague grounds without any baseless allegations for long periods, ignoring regular criminal justice safeguards instead of following the proper administrative law, proper the procedure of the court of law. They are just abusing the powers. They are just abusing that act, and it is a very shameful act that these acts are called and passed by the Indian Parliament, and the Indian Parliament, who claims that they are the biggest democracy. But why they have such a law which give the authority to their armed forces to abuse those laws? If there is an abuse of powers, abuse of authorities, these things must have been reviewed. And now the United Nations gave that recommendations. They must remove that. I have some. I'd like to refer few laws which is called, which is referred by the Altaf Sanwani as well. The draconian laws, the Jammu and Kashmir Public Safety Act 1978, Jammu and Kashmir Disturbed Area Act 1990, Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Act 1990, the Armed Forces Jammu and Kashmir Special Power Act 1990. This law is very vastly used by armed forces just to punish the people, to put them in prison without charge, without any allegations, anything. They can make people disappear without they have full immunity. Actually, they have full protection of law, that they can do anything, whatever they want to do. And further, lawful activities prevention amendment ordinance 2004, the National Security Act, the Official Secrets Act, the Criminal Procedure Code, Indian Telegraph Act. These are the things, and there's a very long list of the world leaders, the world institutions who commented on these laws, that says that these laws give a license to kill. It is the comment by the Amnesty International. So I believe that this is highly alarming, unresponsible behavior by a state which is claimed a democratic state. They must need to review those laws. In July 2018, the Indian state government of Jammu and Kashmir amended Section 10 of the Public Safety Act, removing the prohibition on detaining permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir outside the state. At least 40 people, mainly separatist political leaders, were transferred to prisons outside the state in 2018. The Office of Human Rights Commission said that transferred detainees outside the state makes it harder for family members to visit and for legal counsels to meet with them, to provide them legal services, and to help them by all the legal protections. It also noted that the prisons outside the state were considered hostile for Kashmiri Muslim detainees, especially separatist leaders. Finally, the United Nations Human Rights Office said the arms group were responsible for human rights abuses, including kidnappings, killing of civilians, sexual violence, recruitment of children for armed combat, and attacks on the people affiliated or associated with political organizations in Jammu and Kashmir. It cited the Financial Action Task Force and inter-government organizations and the monitors money laundering and terrorist financing, which has called on Pakistan to address its strategic deficiencies. So we do believe those things. There are some deficiencies, but those are not the basic and fundamental breaches of human rights, such as the kidnapping, killing civilians, sexual violence, recruitment of the children for the armed forces. So attacks in Kashmir have resulted in more than 50,000 deaths since 1989, and which is now increased over 100,000 deaths. So my final recommendations and the comments on in today's webinar is that the Pakistani government is rightly raising the issues. The such human rights organizations, the World Muslim Congress, the forums like this today we are having participation. These kind of forums we must need to try and keep raising our voice, because I believe that this world is not bad because of actions of the bad people. This world is becoming bad because silence of good people. So we must need to raise our voice, break the silence, and stop the violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mazum Ali Sindhu Sahab. You brought in the Human Rights Declaration and also the Human Rights Commissioner's report, its recommendations and other things. But I would like to correct in a way certain things which were addressed by you. During all these reports which were published by the Office of the High Commissioner or some of the international NGOs and all that, Government of India till date has failed to do justice to these reports, that they have rejected all those reports on ground. And that's why we were discussing that how can we move forward when the UN Special Rapporteurs issue such communications which are of their nature to the Government of India to address these things, but Government of India is not addressing to them. You said rightly that we should strive for it, we should create awareness on it, and we should keep on knocking the doors of the international power corridors as well as the human rights organizations in order to end the sufferings of the people of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Now I will bring in my friend Mehmet Sakrul Guzel, who is waiting for a long time. Mehmet, you have the floor.
Dear my friend, my brother Vani, thank you very much. And I hope my voice is coming.
It is coming, it was.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I mean, as usual, I prepared something classical program, but as usual, when I listen to people before me, I change my speech. Let's say, let me try to tell something spontaneous, and I got some notes. When the UN special rapporteurs and all these reports, and as well the UN Security Council resolutions define Indian administrative Kashmir, it means that subject to UN Charter, Article 2.7, this is not your territory. And when India answered all these new reports and the special procedures that this is an internal matter, there is a dispute between the definition. Because when the UN defined as a disputed territory, that means that, hey, India, this territory doesn't belong to you. And I have to say something. We have to tell the reality. One of the reasons why Kashmiris are losing till this time inside the UN system and the world, as well as the mistake of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan is that they wrongly defined the legal situation of the Kashmir problem. I mean, from my own experience, I can say that this is the point must be especially indicated and specified in one of the meetings inside the UN General Office. A Pakistan Human Rights Minister participated in the meeting, and the speakers gave the example of Kashmir with same as Catalan. Catalan is a separatist movement, and mostly the Kashmiri's legal side, not the political side, like my friend Mr. Vani or Ahmet Kuruç, prefer to act with the pro-LTT members, pro-Tamil members. and they are separatist movement. I mean, there is the inspiration, people have the inspiration of having their own state. This is something other. But to form a state within a system in the UN, it can be defined as a separatist movement. But Kashmir is not a separatist movement. Why? This is my fight for a long time, and this has been the reason why the Indian government so easily revocate Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. Because what the Kashmir is, or including the officials from the Pakistan Foreign Ministry, they say that, hey, this is a problem of self-determination, and they use the UN Charter 1.1 and then Article 555. And especially the Kashmiri legal sides, they use the international conventions for civil and political rights, the wording of self-determination. When you use all these things, in fact, you define the internal right to self-determination. That doesn't give you any right for a statehood. But what has happened from 1947 is that this is a case of decolonization. Why Kashmir is not in the list of decolonization is that the procedure was taken before the list of decolonization was prepared by the UN. And when there is the choice given for the more than 550 princely states, this was a act of decolonization subject to Article 73 of the UN Charter. And this is why the territory of Kashmir is defined as a disputed territory. And let's remember something. There is a principle, very famous, maxim elegans contrary non est coidantus. This is the Latin word, and I pronounce it very bad. I'm sorry. But it means that you cannot say something cold and something hot at the same time in the same place. So let's remember Junagadh, not Kashmir. This is the vice versa situation. And let's remember what India had said during the UN Security Council resolutions. For the other people, I would like to say one thing. So the princely state of Kashmir, most of the population was Muslim, still like this, and there's the Hindu, and he made the preference on India. Junagadh was vice versa. A Muslim prince chose Pakistan, and India said no. Let me read it. Mr. Gopal-Lasvi Iyengar informed the UN Security Council that on September 11th of 1947, Prime Minister of India sent a telegram to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. In the telegraph, it is said that the Dominion of India would be prepared to accept any democratic test in respect of the accession of Junagadh state to either of the two dominions. They would accordingly be willing to abide by a verdict of its people in this matter, as certain under their supervision. So, India legal thesis inside the UN Security Council for Junagadh is that it is the verdict of the people. That is the decision of the people by the self-determination. And when you mention something in the UN Security Council, this is called an estoppel. When it is an estoppel, it means that you are accepted to be bound for your future actions for that. Now, if Pakistan takes the case to the International Court of Justice, India is to lose 100%. And revocation of Article 370 is null and void, subject to what India said to the UN Security Council resolution debates. And this is how all these things are taken into account, why it is called disputed territory. Now let's come to a position. Self-determination word becomes a very dirty word and very degenerated, and it is used wrongly. The Kashmiri legal experts till this time, unfortunately, do not understand the meaning of the wordings of self-determination, and the result was the revocation of Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. Separatism is something different. Decolonization is something different. And this is an unfinished decolonization case. Now, I know that my time is limited, but let's try to say something more. Why? You can ask, Kashmir is not in the list of 24, that is the decolonization list. Because There's another formulation made by the UN Security Council, and India and Pakistan are on the table. This is something very complicated in detail. Now we can come to another point, dear Mr. Vani, I need to mention this. The legality of use of force is the important point with the non-state armed groups. I mean, this is the important point. When some people say that there is no definition of terrorism, in fact, the problem in the UN is who has got a right to kill with someone who has got the uniform, and Geneva Conventions is enough to define terrorism subject to protection of the civilians. But when India and Pakistan are on the table, we have to be on the positive side of making peace. There is no need for the use of force with the non-state armed groups. And sometimes we have to be very careful, because I don't like some Kashmiris using the word of different means of self-determination to legitimize the so-called non-state armed groups using force against the Indian soldiers. To protect the life of the Indian soldiers are also our obligation in the sense of humanity. And without these people, India and Pakistan can sit on the table. Dear Mr. Muazzam Ali Sandu said important things. I mean, one state, two state, or other positions. It's not my position, but it's the paperwork. But we have to be very, very careful, and we have to understand which legal thesis must be followed up and how to act. And also the UN body system for Kashmir, there is nothing codified, because when the territory doesn't belong to India and the special procedures, what should be done? There is also one example that we can give from the position of International Court of Justice on the decision of the VOL, and they said that, oh, it's your obligation not to recognize as legal. Now, the international community has an obligation not to recognize as legal Article 370 revocation of the Indian Constitution, but till this time, unfortunately, India against this, Pakistan Foreign Ministry was 3 or 5 steps back. I mean, I can say it's unbelievable. I will tell something last and finish it. On Western Sahara, most of the Polisario Front members don't like me, because I do ask the implementation of Convention of Civil and Political Rights in the Tindufka. But there is a core group on Geneva, and more than 100 NGOs prepared a paper, and they sent this letter to be done. They said that please nullify what the Trump did. And my answer was a very short article. You cannot nullify the null, because the same responsibility of India, what they said inside the UN Security Council, Trump cannot make a decision of its own, or the United States of America, on the problem of Western Sahara. You cannot nullify the null. This is my answer for the core group of the Polisario Front. And they don't like me because this is important. I want to link it with Kashmir. Can you imagine people fighting for right to self-determination? Polisario Front refuses to implementation of Convention of Civil and Political Rights. This is the important point why I am blaming the use of force by the so-called non-state armed groups. Thank you very much, dear Mr. Vani.
Thank you, Mehmet, for your insight. As you pointed out, some critical points about the foreign policy of Pakistan, as well as the legal framework of the UN Security Council, the deliberations which India made there, and the way India enacted Junagadh, and there's very much scope for that. That if that action was rightful, then the state of Jammu and Kashmir, there was a whole population was Muslim, so they had their own choice to do. So you have a point that it's a case of decolonization, and it should be taken like that, and we should pursue through that. That's a very valid point from your side. But one thing I want to tell you that regarding the use of force and by the non-state actors, I think the Kashmiri freedom fighters armed groups were the first who signed the treaty on ban on the mines. They were the ones.
Dottore, posso uscire un attimo? Mi hanno detto che posso recuperare dopo. Grazie mille.
So they have always adhered to the rules and procedures of the UN, but unfortunately, the Indian government, the Indian forces have put us to push to the wall to the Kashmiri youth because of non-availability of any recourse to their what grievances they have. Now I will straight away move to Mariana Zocca. She's from Italy. She's in the office and her boss has given her some minutes to be with us. So Mariana, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rouhani. I am sorry I was in the office and the boss just gave me a few minutes, and I am really, really happy and glad to join you in this side event once again. I am really happy and thank you for wanting me on this panel. As you have probably said, since 2019 in the occupied Kashmiri territories, there is an ongoing lockdown imposed by the Indian authorities. And the rest of the world, and probably all of us, and all the participants and many people around the world have come to know what the lockdown may be and what a lockdown may represent. Just few months later, the lockdown started in Kashmir. Once the lockdown started in Kashmir, at the same time, many human rights violations started as well. And we are here today to talk once again about the Indian responsibilities. I want to underline a point. The first point that I want to underline today is that UN has released two reports. One in 2000 and just let me see, I will give you the right day. The first one is in June 2018, and the second one was in July 2019. About those reports, India said that it did not recognize what has been claimed by the UN and the huge and widespread use of force that it made in the occupied Indian Kashmiri territories. And they also claimed that they did not accept any recommendation, and they also said that the reports were unreal. This is not true. Actually, India is not respecting international law. And the recommendations that I would like to underline today, the first one is that India should end military abuses on the Kashmir civilian population. The civil population is suffering mostly from the for the Indian occupation, and it has caused at the same time many death and many abuses on the children and on women. Furthermore, we are kindly asking UN to institute a commission of inquiry in order to get the truth about all this death and about all the sufferings and all the violations and the abuses made by India. Then, why is important to persecute and come to know what India has made? It is important because according to the reports and to the data and information that we have until today, India has used a disproportionate has made a disproportionate use of force against civilians once again. It has committed also abuses on women, and I am referring also mostly to the militias, to the Indian militias occupying Kashmiri territories. And I would like to underline that it would be important, really important nowadays to investigate the consequences that the consequences on women and the consequences of gender abuses on the civilian population. Furthermore, why it is important to to set up a commission of inquiry for the Indian abuses of human rights and persecutions made in Kashmir. It is important because India is part of many international treaties, and it must be it have to respect the standards set out in those treaties. For example, Article 4 of ICCPR says that dealing with public emergencies, derogations of democratic and democratic orders may be allowed, but only in very short period of time. Laws like this one, laws that like those embodied in ICCPR are part also of the so-called use cogents and are part of international law that must be respected by all the states, and all the states may be held accountable if they do not respect those laws. So since the moment that India has imposed a lockdown in Kashmir, it has violated many international laws. And also, I would like to give you another example. Article 9 of ICCPR is meant to ensure the right of liberty and security of person. I don't think that in Kashmir, liberty and security of people is being respected thanks to the role of Indian militias. So in conclusion, we are here to ask for the establishment of a commission of inquiry, but also I would like to ask to the international community to remind about the meaning of responsibility to protect, and the fact that the international community has to take active step and any possible measure to stop human rights violations. Because as Julia has said previously, the human rights violations and the abuses and the large and widespread use of force that India is committing in the Kashmiri occupied territories may turn not only in crimes against humanity, but also in the crime embodied in Article 6 of the Rome Statute, so the genocide. And I would say that what is ongoing in Kashmir is an attempt to make a genocide. And according to international criminal law, genocide is just the attempt to make this crime. So thank you so much for having me once again in this kind of panel. I am really happy, and I really hope that this pandemic will come to an end so we can meet again in Geneva when we can have meet all together and probably a strong effort on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana, for your insight and getting time out of office. And thanks to your boss who allowed to come out and give your input to this discussion. As you rightly pointed out, this all what India is doing is amounting to genocide, as already Genocide Watch has given 2 alerts about the genocide happening in Kashmir and Solomon genocide that is taking place in Kashmir, and international community has a responsibility under the right to protect, to come in and protect the lives of the people of Kashmir. So finally, I will go to Barrister Nida Salam. I started from Indian occupied Kashmir, and now it's time for daughter of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Nida, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. I'm hoping that all of you are in the best of health and morals. I would like to say thank you to Dr. Shagufta and Vanessa for this invitation. It is my privilege to be among this intellectual panel for the discussion. I strongly believe that human rights are universal and inalienable. All people everywhere in the world are entitled to them. I utterly condemn the violations of human rights in occupied Kashmir by Indian military. Some evidences by United Nations report explicit that gravest violations were conducted by Indian military. India is responsible for that and failed to fulfill her international and even national commitments in relation to legality to prevail. India should be prosecuted in the International Criminal Court. That is my personal perception. According to the Rapporteurs, the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir from the July 2016 to the 2018, over which period allegations of widespread and serious human rights violations were received, and notably excessive use of force by Indian security forces that led to numerous civilian casualties. In July 2016, Indian security forces used excessive force that led unlawful killings, and the killings were in very high numbers in relation to the injuries. One of the most dangerous weapons used against protesters during the unrest in 2016 was the pellet-firing shotguns. Indian Army has been actively operating in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, and there has been documented evidences of these groups committed a wide range of human rights abuses, including kidnapping, killing, rapes. Children were used for child soldiers, sexual assaults and all that. Special laws enforced in the states, such as Armed Forces Special Power Act, Jammu and Kashmir Public Safety Act 1978, have created structures that obstruct the normal course of law and impede accountability and jeopardize the right to remedy for victims of human rights violations. Indian Army is using children as a child soldier. I strongly believe that India is in a breach of Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of 1948, refers to the special care and assistance towards female and children. The Declaration of the Protection of the Women and Children in Emergency and Armed Conflict 1974, the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Administration of Juvenile Justice 1985, Binjan Duel I'm referring to, and the United Nations the Declaration of United Nations Social and Legal Principle relating to the welfare of children 1986. So India is in a breach of international commitment. India is in a breach of international obligations, and I strongly believe that young children, innocent children, should not be used in that. The occupied Kashmir region experienced frequent communications blockades from 2016's unrest as the state government suspended mobiles, internet services on multiple occasions. And in 2016, the authorities in Jammu and Kashmir imposed restrictions on freedom of expression, targeting media and journalists. Indian state and authorities have failed to independently investigate and prosecute allegations of sexual violence by security forces personnel. Article 1 of the United Nations Declaration proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and right. And I strongly believe that the current situation in occupied Kashmir infringed the rights according to the Article 1 of the United Nations Declaration, and India is responsible for that. Article 2 states that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any race, color, sex, language, religion, political and other opinion. Again, India is in a breach for that. Article 26 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights 1966 I'm referring to is the cornerstone of protection against discrimination under the covenant. It states that all persons are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination. I strongly believe that in India, like, courts are not autonomous, and Indian security forces never let anybody to appear in front of the court of law to get justice justice. Conventions on the Right of Children, 1989, Article 2, Subarticle 1 of the Convention on the Right of the Child provides that state parties shall respect and ensure rights of the children mentioned in the convention and their jurisdiction without discrimination of any kind, irrespective of the child, his and her parents, their legal guardians, their color, their religion. When pellet bullets were used on children, again, it was a violation of international commitment of Convention on the Rights of the Child. There was a recent picture of a child circulated on social media across the globe where his grandfather was shot dead by the Indian military and he was sitting on a dead body. So imagine how that child went through the violence and torture, and his right according to Article 1 to live with dignity and integrity was infringed by the Indian state, and India is responsible under the umbrella of the current government, Modi. Okay, so a declaration on the elimination of all forms of intolerance and of discrimination based on religion belief, 1981, Article 1 of the Declaration on the elimination of all forms of intolerance and discrimination based on religion beliefs and guarantees to everyone the right of freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Again, a recent lockdown in India and ethnic cleansing is contrasting, conflicting with Article 1, and India is again responsible for that. I strongly believe that the universal absolute prohibition of torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment is reflected not only in international human rights law but also in international humanitarian law, refugee law, international criminal law. So under no circumstances, including war, public emergency, a terrorist threat, can justify the use of torture, ill treatment. Indian military forces detain people illegally, use pellet bullets on children, raped Muslim women. So it's a torture. Again, India is responsible for that. It is a breach of human rights, and this is the gravest, violations of human rights ever in the history. Experts from the United Nations have said that India new IT rules do not conform with international human rights norms. In a communication sent to the government on the June 11, 2021, recently this month, 3 special rapporteurs from the United Nations expressed serious concern with certain parts of the national legislation and stated that due diligence obligation placed on intermediaries may lead to infringement of a wide range of human rights. The provision related to the traceability of the first originator, intermediary liability and executive oversight of digital media content violates the right of privacy and freedom of speech and expression enshrined in the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. So I strongly believe that Article 19, Article 21, Article 22 of ICCPR, and Article 19 and 20 of UDHR guarantees the universally recognized the right of freedom of opinion and expression and freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Again, when people were locked down, all rights were infringed by India under the umbrella of Modi. Article 26 of ICCPR recognized the right to equality and prohibition of discrimination. There is no equality in occupied Kashmir at all since decades. Human rights defenders and personnel belonging to certain minorities were targeted by Indian military and authorities. Article 14, Subarticle 2 of ICCPR and Article 11, Subarticle 1 of UDHR, by which any reversal of burden of proof by the state and undue delay in trial detention, inconsistent with the international legal standard. In particular, I would like to refer towards Article 17 of ICCPR and Article 12 of UDHR, which protects against arbitrary or unlawful interference with the person's privacy, reputation, and home. Imagine when women were raped, right of privacy was infringed, reputation to live with dignity at home was infringed. India is responsible for that. I would like to further refer to the relevant provision of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1373 2001 that came into 1456 2003, 1566 2004, again 2178 2014, 2341 provision of Security Council came into 2017, and many more, as well as Human Rights Council Resolution 35 and 34 and General Assembly Resolution 49 to 60, 51 to 210. These all resolution requires the state must ensure that measures were taken to combat any sort of violent extremism and terrorism and infringement of human rights. But here, India itself as a state is involved in terrorism, in the infringement of human rights. How can we expect them to fulfill the international obligation in any manner? So there were many reports reported by United Nations. The report in 2012, where Special Rapporteur remained gravely concerned by allegations of extrajudicial killings of Ms. Shala Masood, an environmentalist and human rights defender, exercising her right to freedom to peaceful assembly and association. She is gravely concerned. The United Nations was gravely concerned about the physical and psychological integrity of the people, and especially freedom of this human rights fighter. Actually, again, second report came into 2012. 2012 February, the special rapporteur remains seriously concerned by allegation of act of harassment against members of the people movement, against nuclear energy and human rights defenders, and particularly those promoting and protecting economic, social, and cultural rights. So I strongly believe that this is the time we need to take into account the considerations that for how long we all will debate, what in reality these states are doing, what United Nations is doing. This is the question as a young, proud Pakistani Kashmiri from this part of Kashmir. And when I consider the dramatic situation in that part of Kashmir, for how long we will sit with these intellectuals and will debate how many more years. There's nothing as an act I came across, and I'm very much disheartened, and my heart bleeds when I came across young women, innocent children, and the human rights were infringed in different parts of occupied Kashmir. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Vanessa, once again.
Thank you, Nida, for your intervention. You brought in the legal perspective of the rights violations and how to comment. I will comment on just, you refer to the report of the Special Rapporteur on summary and extra executions who visited India and also Indian occupied Kashmir in 2010. And in his report, he said that the Armed Forces Special Power Act is overriding the fundamental freedoms of the people of Kashmir and asked the government of India to repeal it. And his report was very powerful report. May God bless his soul. Christoph Hans is no more with us. Today, I must pay tribute to the Christoph Hans, was a great friend of the people of Kashmir and all people who were voiceless people who the Christoph Hans raised his voice for them. And I remember the Indian diplomats replied to Christoph Hans' presentation that Mr. Special Rapporteur, you should behave like Special Rapporteur, not like Special Prosecutor. And likewise when Margaret Sakakaya, Special Rapporteur of Human Rights Defenders, visited Kashmir, the next year, the same thing. At that time, there was a State Human Rights Commission in Kashmir. Mr. Justice Faruqi was the head of that State Human Rights Commission. He met Margaret Sakakaya and was a very vocal for human rights. And as soon as he met Margaret Sakakaya and gave his briefing to her, and soon after that, he was removed from the office. So this is how the Indian state has dealt with the human rights machinery so far. But we should keep hope in the systems, and we should keep on advocating the rights of the people, oppressed people, voiceless people, and make use of all those legal recourses which are available to us. As Mr. Mohammed also referred to some of things which are of very critical nature. We should examine these, and I think government of Pakistan and the people of Kashmir and Kashmiris who are advocating the Kashmiri cause at international level, they will have to see those suggestions which Mohammed presented to us, because he has a lot of research on that. And I think we all have to keep on knocking the doors and keep on hammering the conscience of the international community in order to bring these atrocities to an end and to see a peaceful and prosperous future for the people of Kashmir and for the people of this region, so that all the peoples in this region can live in peace, because all the doors of peace in this region, people are investing a lot in the peace in Afghanistan, but they forget the peace in Afghanistan. The doors for peace in Afghanistan also run through the peace in Kashmir. If Kashmir is not in peace, there cannot be peace in this region. So thank you all for your wonderful contributions, for being patient, listening to each other, and sparing your precious time for this webinar. I thank you all, and inshallah, in the future, I will also again invite you for another discussions which will take place during this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wani.
Thank you. Thank you, Mazum sir.
Thank you, Wani
Thank
sir.
you,
It was always great.
हम साया होकर भी आप कहीं नहीं मिलती हैं।
जी?
हम साया होकर भी आप कहीं नहीं मिलती हैं।
अच्छा sir, I will come. Don't worry. I'll pay a visit. I will definitely pay a visit, Wani sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, at last I would like to say and tell to the international world that as a proud Pakistani Kashmiri, we are living with peace, and we expect the same peace in other part as well. There's no violence in this part, and I'm an example that how autonomously as a young educated woman surviving and living with happiness in this society and in this country. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mehmet, do you hear me? Mehmet? Oh, everybody is gone.